everyone. My name is Lauren. I'm here with Megha. We are two engineers on Firebase, and today we're excited to share with you how you can engage your users with targeted notifications. Now, if you're like me, your phone looks something like this. There's a lot of notifications from apps I've forgotten I installed. They're generic, they're untimely, and they're not relevant to what I'm doing at the moment. So more often than not, I just hit the clear all button. So you don't want your app to end up in that category. You don't want to spam your users. And that's why it's so important to target your notifications to the right audience at the right time with the right message. Now you might be thinking, Lauren, that sounds really hard. I don't have the time. I don't have the engineering resources to do this right. Well, the good news is, with Firebase, it's actually really easy. We offer all of the right tools for you to do targeting without needing a lot of time, resources, or expertise. To start with, let me introduce you to two ways to send messages with Firebase. The first is Firebase Cloud Messaging, or FCM for short. And this is a way to send push notifications to users, whether they are inside the app at the moment or have it in the background or not open at all. They just have to have the app installed. And this is a great way to re-engage users and to get back into the app. The second way is Firebase InApp Messaging, or FIM for short. And this is how you can send popover type messages while your app is already open. And this is a great way to nudge users towards certain actions inside your app. And you can customize it in fun ways, like the chinchilla that you saw in the keynote. Now, when we combine FCM and FIM with other Firebase products, we can then personalize the messages really easily. And today, Megha and I will show you 3 of the many possible ways of doing this. For each of these, we'll have a demo, and we're using a game called Bulls and Cows to show you how these 3 will work. So first, Megha will show you how you can use FCM within the console to create a campaign that targets only a subset of users. So this involves no code whatsoever, just some configuration within the console, and you can target a subset of users that the message would be the most relevant to. Next, she will then talk about how you can use FIM along with analytics to send in-app messages after a user takes certain actions. This has minimal code, only 1 line in fact, and this allows you to pick who to send the message to and to send that message when it's the most timely after they've done something that you're interested in. And third, I'll come back and talk about cloud messaging along with functions as a way to send very personalized messages to just one user and right after something happens. And this involves a little bit of code, but as you'll see later, is still not a lot of effort. We'll be sharing all the code afterwards, so no worries about copying any of it down. And Megha will start us off with the first demo.
Thanks, Lauren. So we're going to be using FCM from the console, and we're going to target users who we haven't seen in the app for 3 days. So how does it work? This is not an architecture diagram, but roughly what happens is we're going to go into the cloud messaging console. We're going to say, hey, I want to create a campaign to target users that were last seen 3 or more days ago. And I want to send them this particular message. Play 2 more games and unlock the lightning round to entice them to come back and actually re-engage and become active users again. So let's go to the demo. Sweet. So we have here the landing page for cloud messaging. And let's kick one of these off. So Lauren, if we can edit this guy. So here we have the message text. And if we go into the targeting, that's the interesting part. So we say next here. These are new signals that we've just launched recently. Here we actually say last app engagement is more than 3 days ago. You don't actually have to instrument anything here yourself. We're maintaining that list and keeping track of your users' liveness. And if we go next here, as Jimana was mentioning, now we have long-running campaigns. So you don't need to keep recreating this campaign every day to make sure you're reaching new users who have started, who are about to churn. This, you can run it, create it once, run it, and don't you have to worry about it ever again. So there are other things like conversion events and additional options that you can provide, but we're trying to focus here on the least amount of code and the easiest implementation. If you, say, for example, provide some extra custom data, you might be able to handle a more richer message, but that requires integration efforts, and we're trying to go for the simplest solution here. So let's go next and let's publish that. Perfect. And now that's running. As we saw, we scheduled it to run every day at noon, which is great, but it's not exactly noon right now. So let's see what this will actually look like in the app. So let's test on device. Test on device is going to be your biggest friend in both FCM and FIAM, so you can actually see what it's going to look like. You add your instance ID token here, and let's say test. And open our emulator, and hopefully, if the network is willing, yes, perfect. And we can see here we have this message, which re-engages the user and entices them to come back. And you didn't actually have to add any code here. You just had to add the dependency for FCM in your app and ship it. And then you can do everything from the console. You can tweak this message. You can run A/B tests with other within FCM and more. So let's go back to the slides. So that's all it was, right? We didn't have to add any integration. We just did everything from the console, and we can re-engage these users, and we don't even have to maintain this audience. It's automatically done for you with Firebase. So let's get a little bit more personalized. So using FIAM and analytics, let's target users who are about to burn out. And what I mean by that is, you've noticed that if a user is spending more than 30 minutes in your app playing your game, they're less likely to come back after 7 days. They get tired of the app, they're playing too much, and they get frustrated. So you want to make sure they take a break every 30 minutes, because first of all, it's good for digital wellness. They're taking their eyes off the screen, they're removing eye strain, but also you know they're going to spend more time in your app long term. So if you're familiar with Google Analytics for Firebase, it's how you get detailed analytics to measure and analyze how users have engaged in your app in the past. In FIAM, we're taking that one step further, and we're using them as contextual triggers to target users based on their current and active behaviors. So how does it work? So in the InApp Messaging console, you're going to create a campaign that says, hey, show this particular message if the contextual trigger, played too long, is fired. The user will be going around playing their app, 30 minutes hits, that event gets triggered, played too long, and the in-app message gets showed right then and just to that user. So let's go into the demo. So here we have our landing page, and you might be familiar from this if you saw the keynote. I really like chinchillas, so we're going to have a chinchilla relaxation here. So we saw the device preview, we saw these messages, but let's look at the cool part. So if we go next, and continue further, even past the targeting, we actually here we can use the dynamic audiences that Mai just introduced. We can use predictions that just went GA. But here is the cool part, right? So similar to long-running campaigns, this thing doesn't ever end. It'll happen whenever a user is triggering it. Or you can actually set an end date if you just want to have a campaign for maybe a holiday season. And here's where you set the trigger. Played too long. You can set additional triggers if those are if those are all important to your campaign, or you can have a default of on foreground. On foreground requires the least integration, but is the least effective and least targeted. Because if you imagine, as soon as you open an app, that's on foreground. You see a message, not necessarily the most relevant. And let's look here at the frequency limit. So here we're saying, OK, so the default is once per device for a campaign, because we don't want to spam users with the same message over and over again. But in this case, we actually kind of do. We want to make sure that they're not using this app for more than 30 minutes any day they do it. So that's why we choose this custom frequency and say display no more than once a day. So in this case, we don't have a conversion event that we care about, but you can use the Google Analytics conversion events the same way you can with FCM or remote config. So let's publish this. Awesome. So now let's go to our app. Actually, let's go to our code. I did say there was a little bit of code here. So if you've already been using analytics and you already have them instrumented, you don't actually need to add anything new, as I mentioned in the keynote. But just in case you're not familiar with analytics, you pretty much, this is the Android version, of course, you instantiate it the same way you do any other Firebase service, like Firebase Instance ID or Firebase Messaging. You get an instance of it in your onCreate or onStart, and then you just simply log the event. So you just say here, analytics.log event, played too long is the name that we care about. You can also pass within the bundle some other parameters that you'll use for your metrics reporting. But here for FIAM, the trigger only cares about the event name. So in your normal app, you would have a timer. It would go off after 30 minutes, and it would trigger this event. Because you probably don't want to see us spend 30 minutes playing this game, we're going to trigger it on a button click. So here, we have this dashboard. And when Lauren hits how to play, we should hopefully see our chinchilla appear. So it happens as soon as you click it, because as we said before, it's evaluated client-side. So there's no batching that happens. There's no kind of optimization for battery that we need to do. It happens as soon as they trigger that event. So, and back to the slides. Sorry. Yeah, so that's how it worked. If you're already using Google Analytics for Firebase, you don't actually have to add any code. But in case you aren't, you just need to send a particular trigger and add that in your campaign definition in FIAM, and you're good to go. And you can send a very timely message to a user who has just engaged in a certain behavior. So it's even more personalized than our previous example. So I'm going to send it back to Lauren for the even more exciting, even more personalized use case, FCM and functions.
Thanks, Megha. So with FCM and functions, we're going to do a personalized message to a single user. And the use case is we have a leaderboard for our game that tracks the top players across all time. And if someone gets off of this leaderboard because someone else played better than them, we want to send them a message so they'll get back in the game and defend their position. And to do that, we'll need our friend Cloud Functions for Firebase. Cloud Functions is a Firebase product which allows you to write snippets of backend code that runs on Google servers in response to events happening in your app. And the neat thing about Cloud Functions is that it scales up and down to meet demand. So if you have a lot of usage, it'll scale up to meet that demand. If you have downtime, it'll scale down so you're not paying for servers that you're not using. In our game, we will have a leaderboard. As you can see, it is storing both the user as well as the score that they have. We're storing this in the real-time database, but you can easily do this in Cloud Firestore, and it'll work in a very similar way. Any changes in this real-time database in this particular spot of the leaderboard that we care about will trigger a function to run. And inside the function, we're using the Firebase Admin SDK, a server-side SDK for Firebase, in order to send an FCM message to a single user. So let's see how this works in action. So here we have the real-time database, which is storing our leaderboard as well as all of the user's data. So if we expand the leaderboard, you'll see that there's 2 people on the leaderboard right now. I am number 1, of course. Very good at this game. You see that I have a score of 4,500, and I also have a user ID, which is this long, complicated thing I won't read out to you. And in number 2 spot is Francis with a score of 3,500 and his user ID as well. And we can expand the users node, and we see that there's been 3 players that have played this game. There's Megha, myself, and Francis. And for each of us, we're storing an FCM token. So this is a unique token that corresponds to the device we're playing the game on. And this is what Firebase Admin needs in order to send a message to that device only. We're also storing the handle, the username of the person. And that's our database. It's a pretty simple model. So next, we will see how this works. And to do that, instead of playing, we're actually going to directly change the database. So we're using the Firebase CLI to do this. Here we have a command, Firebase database set, which allows us to directly set a value at that place in the database. And we're going to set /leaderboard/1, which is the number 1 position in the database. And let's say Megha beat my score for some fluke reason. She played better than me, and she got a better score of 5,000. We're going to send the data, which contains her username, her score, and her user ID. So let's click Enter in order to set that. Once we confirm, it'll change the real-time database. So we see that now she's a number 1. And if we go to our emulator, we'll see that I received a message saying, Lauren, Megha just beat your high score. Play now to get back on the leaderboard. Let's see how this happens in code. So that was our app code that you saw. This is our Cloud Functions code. Cloud Functions is written in Node.js. So at the top here, we're importing various SDKs needed for this function to work. The first one is Firebase Functions. This is the SDK to write functions with. The second one is Firebase Admin. This is Firebase's server-side SDK, which you'll hear about later today during a talk. And this allows us to use FCM. And here we're initializing the application by this method, admin.initializeApp. You'll notice something different about this call, which is there are no parameters passed into it. Because Cloud Functions runs on Google servers, it already knows about your project and its configuration values. So you don't need to pass it anything, and it'll initialize the correct application. Next, we are declaring our function. We're going to call it sendLeaderboardMessage. And this is a function that listens to the real-time database at the reference point /leaderboard/ any position. So the curly brackets here means that is a wildcard. So this function will run for leaderboard/1, leaderboard/2, leaderboard/ anything. We're interested in update events. So anytime there's a change, it'll cause this function to run. And inside the function, the parameter we will be getting is a change object. And this contains information about the database before and after the event happens. So we're saving everything that's before in old player and everything that's after in new player. So first thing we're going to do is we want to make sure we don't send this message to a user if they moved up in the leaderboard. So they actually played better. That's why there's been an update event. We don't want to tell them they got off the leaderboard because that's not true. So we're going to check in that case to make sure that the new player score isn't actually lower than the old player score. And if it is actually the case, we'll exit the function right away. If not, we will start constructing the payload to send as the message. So here, if we expand that, we'll see that we are personalizing the message through a template syntax. We're using the old player's handle, so in that case, that's Lauren. The new player handle, Megha, just beat your score. Play now to get back onto the leaderboard. Now we need to actually send this message. So we'll query the database to find the FCM token we need to send the message to me. So if you look on the right-hand side of the real-time database, you'll remember that we store this information inside users/UID/FCM token. And that's exactly what we're doing in the lines below. So we're getting at the root of the database first. So change before ref root gets us the root of the database. We can now traverse through the database to get users/the user's UID, so it'll be my UID in this case, and we're getting this entire value. And if we expand the then, we'll see that snapshot.val gets us the value at that database snapshot, and then FCM token gets us the FCM token string value. And that's all we need to send the message. So we send it with the Firebase admin app that we've already initialized. We say .messaging, .send to device with the token and the payload, and that's what gets us our message. Let's go back to the slide, please. So as a reminder, we stored our leaderboard inside the real-time database, and any changes in the leaderboard positions triggered a function to run. Inside this cloud function, we use the Firebase admin SDK to send a specific message just to that one user who got out of the leaderboard. And we're personalizing the message through a template syntax, and we're sending it right when their score is beat, so it's a very timely notification that they can take action on. Megha will sum up everything.
Thanks, Lauren. So that's really what it is, right? So there are many different ways that you can say, hey, let's have the minimal integration and maybe reach the most users, or add a little bit more work and a little bit more effort and get very, very, very targeted. So we started with a console only. It was very, very simple. We did it using the cloud messaging console. Then we added a little bit more and did in-app messaging and analytics in an interesting and new way, using it as a contextual trigger, not just for metrics reporting. And then finally, as Lauren just showed, using the cloud messaging API, we can get even more customized and even more personal. And this can be anything from like, hey, they just leveled up in an app, they just entered a shop. It's really any of the data that you're getting from the client or from the server that you're evaluating. You can trigger that function, and you're good to go. So Firebase helps you target the right audience at the right time with that right message. You no longer want to be that app that's spamming users. You don't want to have to worry about hitting a user when they're not interested in the message, or they're actually just focusing on maybe making a purchase. You only want to target them when it's actually relevant. So as we promised, the code, what little there is, mainly the functions code, is going to be over at this link. You don't need to copy it down. If you go to Firebase events and click our talk, you can get this link right over there. So if you have any questions, and I hope you do, or comments or feedback if you used any of these products, you can find us in the Ask Firebase Lounge right after this talk, and throughout the day in the Ask Firebase Lounge and Hack Firebase areas. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the day.